Hello friends, welcome to Gord's Poetry Show, number 52, 37, 29, I'm not sure. Let's adjust the lighting, get the cameraman to get his mouth off the whiskey, and we'll proceed with yet another poetry show. And after a very hot summer here in southern Ontario, which some people liked and other people hated, we have now moved into a rather decorous, polite autumn, in which all the flowers are starting to bloom again. All the ones we thought were dead in July, including me. I felt dead in July myself. Hope you had a good summer. And of course, if you're watching this 5 years from now, all these seasonal remarks won't make any sense at all. But, you know, one strives to be polite and sociable. Peter Balakian, an American poet. This is his 8th book, Ozone Journal. And there's a sticker here that says it's the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So let us approach this book with great respect. Not that I don't respect all poetry. Some poems from this book. Hart Crane in LA, 1927. There's a name you'll recognize. We sat in leather chairs around cocktail tables, and the candidates came and went with badges on their jackets, proud and scared, full of knowledge and uncertainty. Everyone was animated as the conversation drifted toward an idea of the text. One colleague pointed out in an interview that it was here, right in this room, under this chandelier, that a poet once came for a while in uncertainty and fear, and that he rode into LA's great pink vacuum of sunsets and spewed Rimbaud out on the boulevard. The candidates kept coming and going. Other colleagues dropped over to say hi or to chat about the menu at the other hotel. And someone else said that the poet loved this place and that we should stay here, where he had come to devour pâté and lobster, where Ivor Winters met him for old-fashioned cocktails and noted later that his hands looked like a seasoned pugilist's, his face like a bad road. Another colleague said you couldn't understand Crane's big poem without context. The other said you couldn't understand context without the poem. Another said, listen to the strange sound the words make when you let the silence in. The first colleague said the words were so clotted and glued that it was impossible to decipher meaning, real meaning. But someone else reminded the others that the poet was so desperate he pawned his grandmother's watch and then wrote to Guide, "No Paris ever yielded such as this." Later, when things got worse, when the houses turned the colour of stale mayonnaise, he went down the beach to read Hopkins and claimed the drawling mockingbirds drowned out the spondees. The first colleague said his idea of the poem was too big for any life to carry, and so the end was inevitable. Then the waiter appeared, slightly harassed, and everyone ordered a lobster club and Diet Coke before the next candidate arrived. As another colleague repeated with an edge in her voice, inevitable? Well, pawning your grandmother's watch. Warhol Mao, 72. And I think I know what this one's about. When I saw his face on a wall at a party in a parlour looking out at the Hudson, at a fundraiser for the winter soldiers over blocks of cheese and baguettes, I had just come from some grainy footage of Dien Bien Phu in a hot black room where the scratched print showed the hills undulating, bodies and parachutes disappearing in jungle grass. Between decadence and the alien, Mao was propped in yellow and rouge, with lipstick and eyeshadow. A real queen. Part decor, part radical something the American lexicon hadn't filled in yet. From the aerial cameras, Haiphong Harbor was liquid light. In liquid light, I saw my draft card float like a giant litho over the highway at 79th. The letters popped, Selective Service System, and morphed into grey rain. Anyone could have done it. Singed, blurred, laminated. And the bartender poured me another identified drink. In the scratched cellulose nitrate, parachutes kept drifting down on the hedges of the Laotian border. On the wall, Mao was the punctum in rouge and yellow and smear. Didn't every myth signify confusion? Confucius, Charlie Chan, Chiang Kai-shek? An American vision of a place. The guy behind me in class asked, "Where is this place?" Hanoi was glittering flecks on the nightly news, and the teacher answered, "Every snake of land is someone's history." We didn't know what we didn't know about the backyard furnaces, the tens of millions. Even if Mao swallowed Darwin and Adam Smith swimming the Yangtze, here on the Upper West in the late spring, he was wallpaper. The most recognizable face in the world. There seemed no point in breaking through the mask. I was glued to the colors for a while, until the next war let us out of Asia, until the sun went down on the wall. Thank you, Peter. A little bit of history there. Art history, cultural history. I remember seeing that Warhol print of Mao, or at least a version of it, hanging in the Art Institute of Chicago. I turned a corner, and there it was, a huge thing up high on the wall. I had no idea it was that big. And I just laughed. I saw the humor of it right away. Which you can't get from looking at it in a book. Richard Kelly Kemick, Caribou Run. Caribou Run serves notice that a formidable new talent has been let loose on the terrain of Canadian poetry. Indeed. Published by Goose Lane Editions, and it is quite an impressive book, I must say. And we all know about caribous and running, don't we? Even you urbanites that probably haven't even, pushed a little plate of food to a dog. You know what caribous are, don't you? Oh, all Canadians do. Of course we do. Here's a good one. Migration is disciplined wanderlust. The cerebral compass of birds, the solar barb of insects, the maternal spurs of mammals. And then there's my 17-year-old self in the doorframe of my parents' house. It's all a grand march, but modest as the footprints of Laotili. Come spring, female caribou separate themselves from their male offspring, since colts aren't permitted in the calving grounds. If intimidation and charging fail, a cow will sprint nocturnal across a stretch of ice, careful not to leave tracks. At a red light on the way to the airport, the 3 a.m. streetlights blurred in rain. My mother traces half moons behind my ear, then grips and regrips the steering wheel, knuckles pulsing like the turn signal. There is an element of decay implicit in parenthood, one I am only beginning to understand. A votive release and what distance really demands. How what you love you want to leave, always at the same time. My boot tread in the parkade, a hoof track in the snowbank, an ash etching of a family's footprints, all telling a lie of standing still. I think we'll be hearing more from Mr. Kemick. Caribou Run, out this year, I think, or maybe last year. Recent. Now, getting a little serious. Soraya Peerbaye. I hope I pronounced that correctly. The book is Tell, Poems for a Girlhood, from Peddler Press. This is an interesting mixture of reportage and, well, lyric poetry. It reflects on a crime here in Canada that many of us are familiar with. Let me quote, Rena Verk was a girl of South Asian descent who was murdered on November the 14th, 1997 in Saanich, British Columbia. At least 8 young people participated in the initial assault on the south side of Craigflower Bridge while more looked on. 7 of our assailants were girls, 5 were white. Among them were Kelly Allard and Warren Glawatsky. Verk rose from that beating and walked north across the bridge toward home. Her drowned body was found in the gorge waterway. It was a grim story that occupied us all for many weeks as the trial went on. As I say, this poetry book tries to report on that and reflect poetically on the tragedy. And there are words from the court documents included here, obvious to me as they are in italics. I will try to make them slightly obvious to you. Washerwoman. The pathologist separated injury from immersion change. The wrinkly washerwoman appearance of palms and soles. I thought of the brown-skinned washerwomen back on the island, standing up to their thighs in water in saris. Slap of clothes, bubbles streaming downriver along bright-coloured polis. Grey soap scum at the edge. She spoke of surface layers slackened, sloughed. Skin slippage. The body bloated, firm to the touch. Tense. Slow time. Maybe it's geologies I love. I am 9 in a ravine, its origins in mind like a dream. A red river, volcanic, black-crusted and thick. Holds of basaltic rock for my hands. I clamber with my father, my brother, in the Gorge de la Rivière Noire. Here the force is ice, the receding tongue of the glacier causing the land to lift, leaving it isolated from the influence of tides. A series of shallow lakes, a swamp surrounded by forest. The stratum of peat is the story. Litter of pine cones holding themselves close, their hard brown petals. To be a child, to be overwhelmed by slow time, event of 10,000 years, the violent rush of tides without witness. The ocean rising again, wanting the gorge. Once I dreamed huge trees at the edge of a sea that is no longer there. Roots unearthed, carved out, like old teeth, salt lines on tree trunks. Stones. I will take anything that is given. The gleam of her mouth, black-throated, blue-throat froth like frog spawn, or moons upon moons, forceps descending to lift pebbles from a girl's throat. What do the pebbles tell you? That she was alive when taken into the water, that she was pressed face down in the gorge, that it became harder, that she had to be more brave. The quick coil and suck, turmoil within, watery night against her open eyes. That is what we use for tenderness, the terminology we are given. Agonal gasp. Clutch of tongue between the teeth, the common gestures of the drowned, the common gifts they bring when we dredge them back. A reed clutched in the hand. A couple of poems from Tell, Poems for a Girlhood, dedicated to the departed Rena Verk. A sad story. One that repeats itself all too often, of course. Now, on a happier note, they found some more poems by Pablo Neruda, as if he hadn't written 10,000 already. The English translation is called Then Come Back, the Lost Neruda Poems, translated by Forrest Gander. And a beautiful edition, beautiful hardback, with reproductions of the original sort of scribbled on menus and bits of random paper that they found at the back of shelves and whatnot. I believe his widow found them some years ago. A lovely book, beautiful translations, an excellent introduction by Forrest Gander. It was so good I wanted to read it myself. Beside the poems. Maybe we'll get to that another time. We're got a lot to get through today. So we'll just by the way, alternate, well, no, maybe not alternate, the English translations and then the Spanish for those of you who are multilingual. Not myself, unfortunately. But I think I know a couple of fans of Spanish poetry who might be really interested in this. You know who you are. Number 1, they're numbered. I touch your feet in the shade, your hands in the light, and on the flight your peregrine eyes guide me, Mathilde. With kisses your mouth taught me, my lips came to know fire. O legs bequeathed the creaminess of perfect oats. The battle spread, its heart a meadow, when I pressed my ears to your breasts. My blood pounded out your Araucan syllable. Five. Crossing the sky, I near the red ray of your hair, of earth and wheat I am, and as I close in, your fire kindles itself inside me, and the rocks and flower ignite. That's why my heart expands and rises into bread for your mouth to devour, and my blood is wine poured for you. You and I are the land full of fruit. Bread, fire, blood, and wine make up the earthy love that sears us. 21. These two solitary men, those first men up there, what of ours did they bring with them? What from us, the men of earth? It occurs to me that the light was fresh then, that an unwinking star journeyed along, cutting short and linking distances, their faces unused to the awesome desolation. In pure space, among astral bodies, polished and glistening like grass at dawn, something new came from the earth. Wings or bone coldness, enormous drops of water or surprise thoughts, a strange bird throbbing to the distant human heart. And not only that, but cities, smoke, the roar of crowds, bells and violins, the feet of children leaving school, All of that is alive in space now. From now on, because the astronauts didn't go by themselves, they brought our Earth the odors of moss and forest, love, the crisscrossed limbs of men and women, terrestrial rains over the prairies. Something floated up like a wedding dress behind the two spaceships. It was our spring on Earth, blooming for the first time, that conquered an inanimate heaven, depositing in those altitudes the seed of our kind. Then come back the Lost Neruda poems, translated by Forrest Gander. Copper Canyon Press, another beautiful production from Copper Canyon. Where would we be without them? Somewhat poorer, I would say. My friend Jim Smith, an older book of his, Lionel Rock, or is it Roke? 1998, this one. And, Jim's a political chap, very fond of political poetry and thoughts with great political relevance. And one memorable poem from this fine book, Lionel Rock. Like that cover. Well, thank God that is done. I could be downstairs watching television or making my mind a blank until and if the postman delivers the unemployment check in time for me to cash it, before or after a 2 o'clock appointment with Joanne's dentist for a cleaning and checkup, which is the only real event written in my leather-covered daytimer datebook for today. I could be drinking and thus oblivious to the subtle, irreversible changes in my liver as it accumulates fat to scar and die. I could be eating chocolate ice cream obsessively and thinking about exercise on a regular basis. I could even be plowing through a well-used Spanish-English dictionary in a quest for a reason to go to Nicaragua again, to drink and pass out and be stripped and beaten in the pathetic excuse for an alley 2 quadras north of and around the corner from where the dog pissed against the tree, because I supported in some manner unclear to me the Sandinista Front for National Liberation, to which Rugama delivered the flavor of his life, within vomiting distance from where I had hours before seen colourful murals being erased by civil servants of the new US government, bringing remnants of a loyal army to tears. Thanks, Jim. Those good old days in Central America. I don't suppose Reagan's turning in his grave, but he ought to be. Another poet friend of mine, Steve Venright, who I believe has a new book coming out this fall, 2016. Well, this isn't a new book. This is an older book. Floors of Enduring Beauty, I might add. Nice title. And a classic bit of Steve Venright, what to call it, surreal fantasias? I don't know, but I like them. Afternoon of the Needle Gnomes. Stealing softly and sharply into a spinster's trance, they come. Soaked in sunbeams of the cataleptic day, gleaming, these tiny slender men, if men they be, jumble forthright onto the white shag carpet of the living room where no flop-eared terrier dares intervene. They have her, the lonely old lady, immobilized by some alien spell. "We've come for burnt meat," they squeak in unison, and then telepathically, "But we like tarts too." What she wants to say is, "Let me fix you a little something." But no words emerge, and she wonders anyway if her choice of words, had they been heard, might not have offended. But they are little, and their long pins glint like tinsel. Why is everything so unusual today? Why is my body torpid but my senses in vigil? The jays have stopped calling. There are no children at play. No neighbours return with trunks full of groceries, echoing their door slams against bay-windowed bungalows. What is it that my thoughts are so clear but my body so slow, while these men like hummingbirds jab and giggle, then are stern again? A jet roars, scorching and sudden, over the neighbourhood. The little men disperse in a twinkling, leaving her to ponder, now mobile, a spill of needles on the carpet at her feet, a dog in want of comforting, and the memory of visitors mysterious, yet not unpleasant, of a make and manner rarely seen in her part of town. Perhaps they'll come again when she's better disposed to host them. That would be nice. Steve Venright, Floors of Enduring Beauty. Seek it out. It's probably long out of print, but seek it out anyway. It's well worth it. It's filled with marvellous little sort of story poems. Sort of like that one, but longer. 2007. Oh, that's really old. Oh. Not as old as 1607, but you know, it's getting there. Speaking of old, Suzanne Buffam. We've read from her before, but not from this book. This is like an early one. Maybe it's even a first, I don't know. Past Imperfect, 2005. The Starfish. A wave reached up to tug my hem. Because of you, I let it pull me in. And then I turned from where you stood, delighting in my own delight at yours and my soaked skirt, and swam towards the middle of the lake. Between my strokes, erratic, slack, small buffetings that gave the day, your laughter from the shore, their shape. Your skipped voice lit across the waves and gave me something vanishing to aim for, something solid to outreach. Did I want you to lose sight of me? Just long enough for me to learn how being lost would feel? I felt you're watching for my face, my wave, any solid part of what I'd led you to believe. I leaned back in the lake and let it take me, almost, under. Above my waist, fanned out around me in the waves, my skirt rose up and made me of a shape I couldn't take on shore or keep. Well, lots of good ones in this. Oh, really good. I like Suzanne's work. Several times we've read from John Ashbery, King of Modern Verse, and I'm always amused by how various critics and editors try to explain his weirdness, which I think is just wonderful, and I don't think it needs any explaining at all. But the latest attempt is in Harper's, August 2016. There's 4 Ashbery verses, and there's an introduction by Ben Lerner. I'm going to read just a little bit of it. Many of John Ashbery's recent poems are full of sayings and parables and cliches. But from what culture, what country? The world of these poems resembles ours. There are ball games and movies and suburbs and Jesus. But while Ashbery's language often feels well-worn, do not fear the gulches asleep on the farm, be ready to hug your glass star, it's hard to say who exactly wore it and why. This mixture of familiarity and foreignness is at once funny and profound. Many of the formulations are ridiculous, and yet it's as though Ashbery has invented an Esperanto through which we have access to the kitsch of all possible worlds. We hear, as if for the millionth time, what we have never heard before. True but unnecessary. Kitsch of all possible worlds. That should be the title of his next book. Oh yeah. So one of the poems is called Commotion of the Birds. I don't know, isn't that a reference to a classic Persian poet, Communion of the Birds, or Conference of the Birds? I think it is. I've even seen jazz musicians refer to that. Anyway, this one's called Commotion of the Birds. We're moving right along through the 17th century. The latter part is fine, much more modern than the earlier part. Now we have Restoration comedy. Webster and Shakespeare and Corneille were fine for their time, but not modern enough. Though an improvement over the 16th century of Henry VIII, Lassus, and Petrus Christus, who, paradoxically, seem more modern than their immediate successors, Tyndale, Moroni, and Luca Marazzonio among them. Often it's a question of seeming rather than being modern. Seeming is almost as good as being, sometimes, and occasionally just as good. Whether it can ever be better is a question best left to philosophers and others of their ilk, who know things in a way others cannot, even though the things are often almost the same as the things we know. We know, for instance, how Carissimi influenced Charpentier. Measured propositions with a loop at the end of them that brings things back to the beginning, only a little higher up. The loop is Italian, imported to the court of France and first despised, then accepted without any acknowledgement of where it came from, as the French are wont to do. It may be that some recognize it in its new guise. That can be put off till another century, when historians will claim it all happened normally as a result of history. The Baroque has a way of tumbling out at us when we thought it had been safely stowed away. The classical ignores it, or doesn't mind too much. It has other things on its mind, of lesser import, it turns out. Still, we are right to grow with it, looking forward impatiently to modernism, when everything will work out for the better somehow. Until then, it's better to indulge our tastes in whatever feels right for them. This shoe, that strap, will come to seem useful one day when modernism's thoughtful presence is installed all around, like the remnants of a construction project. It's good to be modern if you can stand it. It's like being left out in the rain and coming to understand that you were always this way. Modern, wet, abandoned, though with that special intuition that makes you realize you weren't meant to be somebody else, for whom the makers of modernism will stand inspection, even as they wither and fade into day's glare. Ah, yes. The king of modern madness, of whom many other poets water down his vision and turn it into their own, and look all sort of smug and naive and, what, me? Steal a metaphor from John Ashbery? Come now. I'd never do such a thing. Anyway, he's a great guy to steal from, just like Shakespeare in the Bible. He's endless. You can just keep grabbing stuff, kind of remodeling it like another little bit of clay and shoving it into another stanza. Why? I've even done it myself once in a while, although I didn't actually realize it at the time. Anyway, slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and all that. I look around the world and I wish the quality of mercy were not strained. We need more mercy and we need more kindness. But you all know that anyway. Not for me to tell you that. Anyway, another of Gord's Poetry Show, where poets talk to each other in the most beautiful and strange of languages. And it's, what have I said before? It's better than speeches, it's better than journalism, it's better than prayer. It's language at its most radiant. And I encourage you all to speak in stanzas for the rest of your lives. I'm going to pause now. Bye.